Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Swedenborg and Life Live. Today we're going to be talking about spiritual connection and how it all works. My name is Curtis Childs. I'm the host. This is Dr. Jonathan Rose.
Hey Curtis.
Thanks so much for hanging out today. Hey, if you've been watching the show for a little bit and you haven't yet, please subscribe to our channel and like this video. Those things both help us immensely. We're already grateful to you for joining us, but that would just push it over the top, I think, for us. Today we're going to be following up on last week's show that we called Angels After Terrorism. And we call it that because we actually had an interview with two parents of someone who was killed in the terror attacks in Nice, France a couple of years ago. Really powerful story. I would recommend watching it if you haven't. And they told their story of how, the loss that they'd been through, how finding our show and Swedenborg's material was helpful. And it was with grief and all that, but it was also a story of connection with their son, Nick, and the reality of the spiritual side of things,
Yeah, that's right.
And we became aware of them, actually. Amy, our marketing coordinator, she found this article, which was a story about those two, and there's them with their son, Nick, and in it, they happened to mention Swedenborg. And so we, of course, were always searching for where is that coming up, and we found this, and we thought, wow, how do they know about Swedenborg? How do they know about the two angels that are with someone? We got in touch, and it turns out they'd learned that from the show. So we're going to see a little more from Conrad and Paula later in this episode. But tonight we want to talk about this idea of thought bringing presence. And not just thought bringing presence, but love bringing union.
Yes, right.
And that's sort of something that comes up throughout Swedenborg's work.
Swedenborg talks about that quite a bit.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, it's a universal principle in the spiritual world.
So let's look at these universal principles and what keeps people connected in the spirit. And we're going to begin with presence and union. So as we've said in past shows, getting together with people works differently in the spiritual world than it does in the physical world. That Swedenborg describes this sort of grand duality, that there's a physical side of things and a spiritual side of things. And they're both similar and different. I mean, they're similar in that they both have sets of laws, right? Just like the physical world is governed by gravity and that kind of stuff.
And apparently the experience of being in each one is quite similar. You see similar kinds of things. Some people who've died and crossed over don't even realize they've passed on and so on.
Yeah.
And yet he describes a very different way that the whole geography thing works out.
Yes, you can have an experience that's not too different, but the underlying principles, the mechanics for it are very different. And in the spirit, the things that matter are seemingly arbitrary physical forces. They are, almost psychological forces. So this is from Swedenborg's Divine Providence, number 29. He says, in the spiritual world, all union takes place by means of attentiveness. When anyone there is thinking about someone else because of a desire to talk with her or him, that other person is immediately present. They see each other face to face. Literally present.
Literally present, that's right. Not just like a, video chat or something like that.
Yes, okay. The same thing happens when someone is thinking about someone else because of a loving affection, but in this case, the result is a union. While in the former case, it's only a presence.
Wow, so presence already sounds pretty great.
Yeah.
But then you go to the next level where it's union, there's some kind of bond or togetherness or something that happens.
And that goes with, he says, spiritually, the intent behind something is what makes it what it is. So if you want to see someone for some tertiary reason, you want to interact or talk or something, that's one thing. But if you love somebody and that's what brings you together, there's this whole different connection. This phenomenon, he says, is unique to the spiritual world.
Yes.
The reason is that everyone there is spiritual. It's different in the physical world where all of us are material. In Swedenborg will often labor to make distinctions between the different kinds of substance and
that's right.
And all that. He says, in the physical world, the same thing is happening in the feelings and thoughts of our spirits. What is that? What does he mean by that?
That is very interesting. What I think he's talking about is that if we sort of look at ourselves, we think of somebody, they'll be immediately sort of present in our minds. We sort of picture them, and so I think something similar is happening at that thought level or the feeling level. It's just not that they physically come into our presence.
Because friends, your thoughts and feelings are spiritual. I mean,
Yeah.
according to Swedenborg, the
That's
conscious side of us is our spirit, and that the input and phenomena we experience there, that's like the way we feel about things, the insights, the ideas we get. That's the spiritual world coming in there. So
We're already experiencing that at some level. Yeah.
we're already playing this game, but it feels abstract to us because we're looking through the material body, so we don't seem to zoom around, even though our spirit is kind of doing that.
That's right.
But since there is space in this world, while in the spiritual world there only seems to be space, the things that happen in the thoughts of our spirits come out in actions there.
That's cool. It reminds me of things that you read about in near-death experiences where people they want to see that hill over there and then whoop, they're right there.
Yeah.
It's a method of travel. It's just that desire takes them there.
And we're trying to get technology that mimics that, but that's
Yeah.
kind of built into the fabric because what's psychological, what conscious beings are doing matters like even more there. That can actually rearrange the space of things. And so if two people, if together who are on Earth are thinking about each other intently, it may be that their spirits are together.
Yeah, Swedenborg says that he sometimes had the experience of having conscious interaction with other people in the spiritual world,
Yeah.
the spirits of people who are still alive
Oh, that's so weird.
here, and then he would encounter the person in the flesh, and they would act like they'd never met him and didn't know him. And it would be so weird to him. So, wait, we just spent the last 3 days
Yes.
talking, So there can be kind of a disconnect there in terms of the conscious contact
Yeah.
or something, but
But
still something's going on, some conversation.
right, that you can still, there can be a spiritual connection. And if that can happen, even abstractly, sort of, almost like a sleepwalking thing between people here, what about us thinking about our loved ones who have passed on
Yeah,
to that side?
that's right. It's got to be a similar connection, even if we don't feel that it's like fully interactive where you get to ask a million questions or
Yeah.
something like that. It's still a presence, a sense of you can picture them in your mind's eye. And
Right, and who knows how vivid that actually is to them on that side.
yeah, we don't know quite what that's like for them.
Well,
but-
Swedenborg talks a little bit about what it means to be appearing to someone spiritually. So he says, appearing to someone in an inner sense means being seen in thought, not with the eyes.
So this would be a biblical phrase that he's picking up
Yep.
here and explaining that this in the Bible, when you hear about something like appearing to someone, that means it's not physical eyes, it's in your thought.
Which, FYI, he says that all the text in the Bible is written in such a way that it is describing the sort of laws of how the spiritual things.
That's right. It's really more about the spiritual world than it is about
Yeah.
this world.
Even though it doesn't seem like that.
Right.
Thought does bring presence too, because when you think about someone, that person stands present before your inner eye. In the other life, this happens in a very real way, because when people there think intensely about another, that other appears in their presence.
I like the word intensely there, that you're really, sometimes you just
Yep.
got somebody in your mind and for an hour, you're just thinking about them.
But it's not like, oh wait, who is that person at that? And you accidentally call like 4 or 5 different
Right.
people. And sorry, I didn't mean to think
No,
about
wrong
you like
last
that.
name. Yeah, right.
This is how friends come together there, and also enemies, at whose hands they suffer severely.
Wow, that quote took a bit of a dark hop at the end there, didn't it? Bit of a
By
turn.
the way, you'll be miserably.
Whoa,
tormented
Yeah,
by
well, but that is the other side of it, of the same phenomenon, isn't it? That-
And Swedenborg saw that happen a lot. That if you hold on to a grudge or to hatred, it's the same principle. This can pull that person towards you as
yeah,
well.
it's just oddly, it's just as much of a bond. It's just the flip side of that love connection.
Well, I feel like that's extra incentive to let go of that stuff. Maybe work on your forgiveness. This is a way to break those negative attachments because those things are holding you back spiritually anyway.
Yeah, that's right.
But it is an interesting quote, this idea about appearing, just popping up in the spiritual world. I'm thinking, like, how would that work? And I'm, in the physical world, let's say that I was thinking about someone. Let's say I started thinking intently about our art director, Matt. So
Oh, okay.
Just picturing him, and you kind of get a picture of it, in your mind. But Matt, hey,
Are you guys filming right now?
of course.
Where does he go?
I think there's like some ductwork back there or something.
That's so
Okay, so it
freaky.
happened that time, which it goes against the point I'm making. But
Yes,
that's an
right.
anomaly, right? Usually, if you're thinking about somebody on Earth they don't pop up. They're not present. It's just in the mind.
They don't. That's right. You
But-
may see them in your mind's eye, but it's
Yeah.
like they might be on the other side of the planet or something. Yeah.
But in the spiritual world, instead of just popping into the mind, it would happen like
They
that.
would actually appear
It would actually.
in a, so to speak, a fleshly form or something. They would be there in some physical form.
That's right. And so it's that thought is like gravity that pulls and brings this presence and ability to communicate. But if it's
That's
just
right.
if it's just thought, it's sort of temporary, you know.
Yes, it's a very interesting example of how thought and love are two different bandwidths in a sense. Because if you think about someone, maybe you want to have a debate or you want to talk about things, but maybe you don't see eye to eye.
Yeah.
But love brings a more permanent association, doesn't it? Like love
Right.
goes farther than that.
Well, Swedenborg talks about it in Apocalypse Revealed 9:37. In the spiritual world, knowledge and acknowledgement bring about all presence, while feelings of love bring about all connection. Spatial distance in the spiritual world is simply an appearance that reflects similarity of heart. That is, similarity of feelings and the thoughts that go with them.
That's so wild to think about that the people who you feel this intense love for, so often in this world, you feel a love for somebody and then you have to part company and you don't get to see them for years or whatever. It's amazing to think you'd actually be together in that other world.
Yeah, that the affection sort of warps space-time. That no,
Right.
you're close to people.
right.
It's a immutable law that you're only as far from people as you're far from them emotionally.
Yes, right. It's amazing. It's
So
amazing
when
to think about.
someone knows someone else, whether by reputation or because of business dealings or socially or as a relative, when the one thinks about the other because of their acquaintance, the other becomes present, even though they may have seemed to be hundreds of miles away from each other. So you can, there's this appearance that you don't see them around all the time, but they can be there in an instant.
And that's not even the love one.
But-
That's just the thinking one.
Yes. So let me see if I can deliver on this love one here. But if the one also loves the other, they dwell together in the same community. And if the love is intimate, they live together in the same house.
Oh, that's amazing. That's really,
Yeah.
really amazing. I know you can have that in this world where you feel like somebody's family, even though technically they're not a blood relative or something,
Right.
But
There,
amazing to think that you would, that would be manifested in some way in the spiritual
and it's
world.
all this detail of how that arrangement occurs, that there are communities that come together because of a shared kind of love and wisdom, but then even within that, there are people, neighborhoods that are closer together, but even within houses, it's like you're with the people that you're going to most connect with and can most do useful things
I
for
can't
the
help
greater
but think
good.
that's going to be a great part of heaven.
Yeah,
Just that feature would kind of make it more heavenly
for sure. Like everybody.
than just not knowing who the people you're living
Yeah,
next
and
to.
no more like, oh, my roommate, So if that's a principle, as we said, spiritual principles are consistent across all of
That's
spiritual
right.
reality. So if that's what draws people together, couldn't this give us insight into how we draw close to or connect to God? Right? I mean, let's
right.
at least take our best shot at it.
Yeah.
Next part. So connecting with God, relatively important thing to do. I mean, a lot of people
Yeah, you would.
are saying
Seems like
it's
it would be pretty important,
the
doesn't it?
point of life, or it's definitely, Swedenborg, he's coming back with all this information and is saying, opening up to this connection is what we're here doing.
Yeah.
So, obviously I'm interested in what insight Swedenborg had into
Yeah.
how the whole thing works. And he actually breaks it down into, we've been talking about the spiritual world and the physical world. He says it happens differently for angels who are in the spiritual world versus for us here in the physical world.
Wow.
So I want to start with what he has to say about this, how this connection functions between angels and God. So this is from Divine Providence 29. I mention this to show how the Lord's union with angels and their apparent mutual union with the Lord take place. All the angels turn their faces toward the Lord. The Lord looks at them in the forehead, while the angels look at the Lord with their eyes. This is because the forehead corresponds to love and its desires, and the eyes correspond to wisdom and its perceptions. Still, angels are not turning their face toward the Lord on their own. The Lord is turning them toward himself, and doing so by flowing into the love of their lives. He comes through this into their perceptions and thoughts, and that is how he turns them. This circle of love to thoughts and of thoughts from love to love occurs in all the functions of the human mind. We can call it the circle of life. There's got to be a pretty fundamental process to get called the circle of life.
Yes.
And there you see
really.
again that there's a particular principle that is consistent throughout how the spiritual things works. It happens in little bits in your mind, and it's the way that God is connecting to you.
Several things about that quote are mind-boggling to me. First of all, just the nerve to say, I'm going to tell you right now, the relationship between God and the angel, how exactly how that works.
Here's
Almost
the mechanics.
Sort of mechanically,
right?
How that operates and everything. So that's just amazing. And I don't know that I know exactly what he's talking about, but it's amazing that he's saying it's almost fractal, that on all levels.
Yeah.
That's going on in some sense, that sort of cycle. It's also very moving to me that we may feel in the course of our earthly lives like we're seeking God and we're pounding on the door, or we're praying,
yeah.
we want this or we need that and everything like that. But this quote kind of makes it clear that, oh no, really, the Lord is the active party and He's turning us toward Himself. What we think is us trying to find Him and we may or may not be able to, is like He's when you get to that angel level, at least, He's doing that. He's the active party.
That is cool. That it's not, hey, can I please get on your radar? It's that He's trying to get Himself on our radar.
He's doing it. Yeah.
And look at the asymmetrical nature of this connection. You'd think that if you're
Wouldn't
going
it be like eye to eye or something, right?
You just stare into God's eyes, and that's how you really get to know each other. But Swedenborg is saying, no, there's a correspondence here that God is coming in through the place that symbolizes love, whereas we're looking from our understanding back to God. And it's that you could get the sense, wait, so are you just sitting there kind of staring at each other the whole time? But the way that spiritual positioning and distance works is such that you can be doing something, living an active, fulfilled life where you're completing tasks and doing complex motions, but yet somehow on a fundamental level, you're always facing the same way.
That's right. He says even four angels can be talking to each other like this, and they're all facing the Lord. It's just a factor of how geography works in that world, because it is about your love and your attention and so on.
Yeah, and they'll often say, oh, this is hard to describe because this stuff is pretty far out of our normal realm of thought. Yeah. But then again, when someone's trying to describe to me why time slows down at the speed of light physically, it's weird.
It gets pretty heady there too.
So if it's hard for you and I to plumb this and know if it's how it really works, but how it does really work is probably going to be complex and strange, just like this.
And how about, you said for angels, but like for us,
right?
When we're here on Earth, like, do we just not have a connection? Or?
No, that connection can be happening here. And Swedenborg talks about it in Divine Love and Wisdom. Do you want to give this one a go?
Sure. Divine Love and Wisdom, 137 to 139. It is the same with us. If we constantly keep the Lord before our eyes, which happens if we are engaged in love and wisdom, then it is not only our eyes and faces that turn to Him, it is our whole mind and our whole heart. That is, it is everything in our intentions and minds and everything in our body at the same time. This turning toward the Lord is an active turning. It's a kind of lifting up. We are actually lifted into heaven's warmth and light, and this is accomplished by an opening of our inner reaches. When these have been opened, love and wisdom flow into the deeper reaches of our minds, and heaven's warmth and light flow into the deeper reaches of our bodies. This results in a lifting, as though we were brought out of the mist into clear air, or out of the air into the ether. Further, love and wisdom, together with their warmth and light, are the Lord with us, the Lord who turns us toward Himself. This active turning toward the Lord comes from love and wisdom together, not from love alone or wisdom alone.
To always in conjunction there. And I think about near the beginning where he says, if we constantly keep the Lord before our eyes. And what does that mean? What does it mean to keep the Lord before your eyes? And I think about the qualities that make up God, which is this universal love for all, the wanting to serve everyone, the good and the true. That if we keep those sort of in our mind's eye, it said that when you picture someone there in the mind's eye, if we picture those qualities, which are probably our best real picture of the Lord,
Right.
and live a life according to it, that's got to be what creates this kind of connection.
Glimpsing that love, in the birth of a child, or
Yeah.
the circumstances of someone's passing into the other world, or just the way events, go in their lives. When you stand back, you can see that mercy and that care that the Lord provides. And I agree with you. And the eyes there have to mean our spiritual eyes, but it's our conscious focus, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
like, where are you consciously focusing? Are you looking for this?
Right.
Are you looking to see those qualities, that the order that's present in the universe throughout?
And give a little time to that, because if you just go on autopilot, your eyes, your spirit, which is what you're thinking about, just goes to like one relatively superficial concern to the next one, to the
Right.
next one. But if you take some time to, and it doesn't have to be that, I'm not paying attention to anything of the world, I'm just thinking about God.
No.
But if you're driving on the road, you can be thinking like, how do I make it so that I'm a good citizen here, that I'm not too close to someone, that I'm not too slow, not too fast. That is, in my mind, that's focusing on the Lord there.
That's right. And Swedenborg talks a lot about how that can be operative in the work that you do,
Right.
or whatever,
Right.
the main pursuits of your life, in your relationships, as you say, and in other ways.
Yeah, so cool to think about. We can get that kind of connection started here, that if we're thinking about God in that way, thought brings presence, and the more we learn to love that kind of life, the more we're getting that union, live in the same house
It's really
with
neat
God.
to think about, even that cycle with the looking at the forehead, and we look
Right.
with our eyes, even here, we can start to get that going.
Well, who wouldn't want to have someone looking through your forehead or something? All right, so as you may have noticed, we're not like live tonight, that there's not a chat. We had to pre-record this because of the upcoming, some people won't be in the office and so on and so on. But that doesn't mean we can't do our Q&A, because we'll just make up questions. No, I'm just kidding. We've got
Questions come in all the time.
We got plenty of questions that come in after the fact, and we're taking some from YouTube on these previous shows that we've done that we didn't get a chance to answer on this show. We're going to answer a few of your questions right now.
Hopefully.
So what's been on your mind, everybody? We're going to go through 4 questions that you guys had asked on 4 episodes that we've done in the past, and we're going to begin with this one. This is Pete Dawson from the episode Good versus Evil on the Mountain. Does everyone have the tunnel experience before they enter the light? If so, at what point are we met by the 2 angels? When he's talking about tunnel experience, I would imagine this is the commonly described part of the near-death experience, where you're initially going through some kind of funnel or tunnel or opening towards a bright light.
Yes, you're traveling in some way. That's right.
And the 2 angels are something that Swedenborg describes traveling with every person. So do those mesh with each other, and what order do they come in? Do you have any thoughts on this?
It's an interesting point. The first thought that comes to mind is that Swedenborg talks about this incredible force of attraction of the Lord drawing your spirit. He said if you were, if your body was in a million pieces, in effect, the Lord would just draw your spirit together, and it's just so powerful. No other force in the universe could resist this drawing that the Lord does. And so that seems to me related to this experience that people have of the tunnel.
Yeah.
Swedenborg doesn't specifically talk about a tunnel of light. From what he describes, he says that these 2 angels are with us even before we die. They're already with us. So I think, in a sense, they ride with you through that whole experience.
Right.
They're present with your heart. They're present at a very deep level, and kind of communicating to see if their thoughts are being received by you, and they're just attending you through that experience. And so I imagine that they're with you as you go through that tunnel, although you may not be aware of them at that time. Some people do sound like they're aware of other people sort of traveling with them, but it happens with great variety.
Okay. Hey, before I give my part of the answer, what am I? We kind of got this echo going on here. It's sort of like when you point a camera at itself.
Right.
It's interesting.
A heart of stone, is that what you're holding?
Yeah, I guess so. I don't remember. It was a long time ago. It's interesting that Swedenborg is heralded for his similarities to near-death experiences.
Yes.
In the book that coined the term near-death experience, Raymond Moody's 1989 classic, I think, Life After Life, he has a whole section on Swedenborg and how that's one of like 4 similarities that he picks out from historical texts to the modern phenomenon. However, the modern near-death experiences, of which I've read quite a lot, they spend so much time talking about the process of what it's like to die, and right in the beginning what happens. Swedenborg only mentions that like once or twice.
Yes, right, and it's a pretty cursory description. It's pretty quick.
Very little detail about it beyond what objects and forces are at play. So I couldn't say for sure how the tunnel plays into everything, but because he has so many other similarities, not only Raymond Moody's book, but then there was that book Tunnel to Eternity that Leon Rhodes wrote with Kenneth Ring, and the foreword talking about all the similarities that were Kenneth Ring, who's one of the early near-death
another
people.
One like Raymond Moody,
he said, like, people who've had a near-death experience have peeked through the door into the afterlife, but Swedenborg explored the whole house. So it's not like Swedenborg is in any way refuting the NDE. He's corroborating it, but there's just not a lot of detail on the most potent aspects of the NDE and where they fit in with Swedenborg.
And as always with Swedenborg, he focuses on what's in your heart, what's in your mind. Like he will occasionally tell you how things look or something, but he's just not that. It's not important. It's not as important to deal with that as it is to just get the basics about the fact that you have angels with you, you're safe, you're protected from harm and from evil and things like that.
So we'll start out a good 0 for 1. We don't really know the exact answer to that. All right, let's look at the next question. Thanks so much. All right, so this is from Keith on will, understanding, and how to get into heaven. Swedenborg talks about us being in heaven and earth at the same time. Does this mean that my wife who has passed is able to interact with my spirit in heaven? So, Keith, thinking about you and sorry for your loss, and my initial reaction is there's a lot of connection there that Swedenborg comments on.
Yes, that does. He does talk about the spirits dwelling together. I don't know exactly what that's like from the other side, what that consciousness is like. He says that generally that spirits are present with us in our thoughts and feelings. They may not know whether we're wearing this bathrobe or that bathrobe or what, but present with our thoughts and feelings. And so there is some kind of togetherness, and yet when people get together after death, there's this joyful reunion as if it wasn't full, it wasn't satisfying across the whole spectrum or something.
Well, he says that married partners, who truly love each other, the spirit of one continues to dwell with the other even if they're separated by death.
And so obviously with what we've just been talking about tonight, it's a good question because with thought bringing presence, all it needs is thought to achieve presence, let alone love. That love is a union or a bond. Yes, you're bound to be together in that same emotional space, I think, even though it's a little frustrating that you don't have the conscious contact. Most people don't,
Right, and we don't know on the other side how conscious are they of that, or how much is there a sensory perception in their consciousness.
That's right. It might be similar to ours, where they are just thinking of us a lot and wondering how we're doing, or something like that.
But isn't it fascinating that Swedenborg can go ahead and write 3 million words, Latin words, on the afterlife and how it, but he doesn't address some of these most basic questions people have. I think it goes to show how important he felt like this other stuff was. The regeneration, the how to get yourself from hell to heaven, this sort of stuff.
How to be a good person. Because that'll be critical to how it goes when the actual reunion occurs in the other life and all that.
So, 0 for 2?
Yeah.
Okay,
I think so.
Thanks so much for your question. This is Christian Swenson on Good vs. Evil on the Mountain. What happens to a person after death who has a mental illness that prevents them from developing rationally? And certainly there can be even just purely physical conditions of the structures of the brain.
Absolutely.
That Swedenborg acknowledges those impede your ability to function. It maybe delays your spiritual development. He says nobody is reformed in a state where they're not rational.
Well, you don't have that freedom and rationality.
And we are obviously our body is so important to our experience of this world here, that it doesn't matter how whole and complete your spirit is, if it doesn't have the proper machine to work through here, that can change things.
Yeah, that's right. And he describes people that he sees, Swedenborg does, in the spiritual world, about whom he feels that he has no sense that they're spiritual at all. They've almost lived like animals, basically, just the lights aren't on, you know. And yet he'll see them just blossom into this wisdom. So I like to think, he doesn't say point blank that I know of, but I like to think that applies to people who've had just a physical problem, or sometimes your development is set back, or whatever it is.
People were asking me
that
recently,
would be a kind of blossoming, like you come into the light,
right?
And you come into this angelic wisdom.
I was talking to a group recently about addiction, and like all the science on how that just rewires your brain so much that it just you're not going to be able to just think your way out of it.
Right.
But also, it's interesting that he says nobody is reformed in a state where you don't have rationality. It's not the same as there's no development. It's maybe like you don't have your chance to do the regeneration part of growth. But that doesn't mean if we're here in this world, there's got to be some use that's happening. So you've got to be able to be laying some foundation. There's got to be some kind of positive progress that's made, or else you wouldn't be here. You'd be in the next life.
Yeah, that's right.
So something good is happening.
And he does talk about, like sometimes he'll use this phrase, if not in this world, then in the next, kind of, you know, that kind of thing, that it can develop. Obviously, lots of people, and even more so in his day, died in infancy, you know, and so all that development happens on the other side, you know.
Right.
And so I think it's a very merciful system, and you know, because we have a certain nature, and so the Lord will work with whatever that is after we die.
Yeah.
And when you're rid of the flesh, it's just, he says it's like coming from darkness into the light. You know, I think it's going to be amazing for all of us to have that experience.
And you never know, like, what spiritual impact whatever conditions you're in are having. That you don't know, like, what
above your pay grade.
Like whatever your physical, mental situation is, you don't know, like, you can't know about somebody else. Well, what choices are they actually dealing with in their inner thoughts and feelings? What are they learning about humility, compassion, all those sorts of things? And we ourselves often don't know. That we are trying to feel like we are participating in it, and like we're kind of managing our own spiritual growth, but we're not. I mean, we don't know the mechanics. It's much like the difference between voluntary and involuntary stuff in the body. That I can say, oh, I'm going to breathe, but all I do is just kind of, like, I don't even know how to describe that. You just like ask for your body to do something. All the complexity of the oxygen getting to your like alveoli or the bronchioles,
we don't know anything about it,
and how that's transferred into the blood. I'm not doing that. You know, so similarly, God is accomplishing all this spiritual stuff, even if we think, oh, well, nothing can be coming out of this.
And some adults who have full freedom and rationality then get in a car accident, they're in a coma for 30 years. Something's going on there.
Right.
You know, I don't think the Lord is not taking advantage of that time to move your spiritual life forward, because that's what he cares about above all else.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, so thanks so much for the question. We're going to do one more. This is Eric Hernandez on the episode, What It Means to Be a Church. Did Swedenborg mention anything about the angels' finite development in heaven? They undergo refinement and perfection, but up to what extent, or is it forever? And it seems
he does get into this.
That there's an interesting combination of finite and infinite that you can develop and be perfected forever, but but you have some kind of parameters set in the kind of person you became in this world. Right.
Like one thing that he says is basically describes 3 different kinds of angels.
Okay.
And each one, in other words, the one word he uses it for is earthly as opposed to spiritual, as opposed to heavenly. Well, each of those, you know, sounds like that's just choices that you made, and that's where you're on that. But you can develop endlessly on that level, and yet no amount of developing on that level will kick you up to the next level.
Yeah.
You know, so there are parameters and limits. But he does talk about an unending development and perfection that goes on to eternity. He even uses this mind-boggling phrase that we're like an egg, and then we hatch, but then that is an egg to the next thing that happens. And so to all eternity, we're never in more than the egg stage compared to the limitless things yet to come, which is mind-boggling to me, so to say the least. And so that type of growth, and the fact that everybody around you is growing and the connections between people is growing. We talked about this in one show about heaven, where I've suffered sometimes from sort of a static idea of heaven. It's not a static, the way he describes it, it's not at all static. So it's hard to describe what those limits would be. He says to all eternity, you'll never turn into God or something like that's just a different level. That's infinite. That really is infinite, and ours is always finite. But it has this endless room for expansion. And we get a little glimpse of that even here in this world, where no matter how much you've already learned, you can learn a little more. Or no matter how much you love, you can love a little more. And so we get to see that even here. And I think that just keeps going like that.
Yeah, infinity and eternity is written into everything. You see the way that the human race is progressing. There are so many more people on this planet than there ever were before. But also we know, you just on a physical, technological sense, there's so much more that we can do now than we've ever been able to do. And that's not about the slowdown. Swedenborg talks about the infinite potential for germination in organisms, like think about plants. And if just the seeds that they're carrying, if all those spores grew into full plants, and how that would expand, and that's all reflective of the nature of God, and as such, that's the image God's trying to put into us. Because if you think of, if there was ever a limit, and it's like, okay, I've finally learned everything, I've grown as much as I can, now I'm here, it might seem like, okay, so now you're at your plateau, but you think about that plateau extending to eternity, it would be pointless. So there's always going to be this growing and this changing, because we sort of think like, eventually you'd get up to where God is and you'd have nowhere to go, but God is actually infinite.
Which is unlimited headroom.
Which is mind-boggling, and thanks for getting us to think about it. Cool. All right, thanks everybody. That was fun, and we promised in the beginning we would hear more from Conrad and Paula about their journey, and so we're going to get to that in the next section. So in searching for answers about life and death and the passing of their son, Conrad and Paula took these two different paths to try to find answers. Conrad went heavily into science and the explanation of the physical world, and Paula went into spirituality. But they both found that they found affirmation for Swedenborg's concepts and got to a similar place by those paths. So first we're going to hear Conrad talk a little bit about his journey.
My wife and I, we took different paths, and she took more of a spiritual path, while I took more of a scientific path. And we came to the same conclusion that Swedenborg really made sense, from both perspectives, and she'll tell you a little bit more on the spiritual side, but, we look at these near-death experiences of people reporting what they saw, and that really makes sense. We look at some of these experiences and it's very similar to the stuff that Swedenborg described. And then for me, I start, I'm looking at, a lot of the quantum mechanics, particle duality, and just realizing that this reality that we have, that, it's just a lot more strange than what we imagine. Particles could be in two parts in one place. There's entanglement, particle entanglement. And that really helps me connect with Nick, because I believe that love is a way of entangling people. And I believe that Nicholas and us, or myself and Paula, we're always going to be entangled. And just like what Swedenborg said, that when you think of somebody with love, they're instantly in your heart. And that's because we're entangled. Just like when you look at one particle from far away and you measure that, the other one instantly, even though it's in the other side of the universe, will react, will acknowledge it. That's how I feel. And now even some of the lectures I've been watching from one professor, I think Leonard Susskind, he had a big debate with Stephen Hawking on black holes and whether or not everything gets destroyed once it goes through a black hole. And actually, he actually wrote a book, I think, the War of the Black Holes. But eventually, they were able to convince Stephen Hawking that he was wrong. And the new theory that's accepted now by physicists, they say that when things fall into a black hole, what they were is permanently recorded on the event horizon. So basically what really goes into the hole is like a holographic projection of that thing, and the real thing's there. So basically, if you were able to throw 2 telephone books, one from LA and one from New York, into a black hole, you'd be on the event horizon, you'd have all the information that created those things are there. And you'd be able to tell, you'd be able to reconstruct it to the point you'd be able to tell this phone book's from LA, this one's from New York. Because the ink is all atoms, and everything how you laid it out is recorded permanently. And now one of the accepted theories now from physicists saying that we may be in a hologram ourselves, that the perimeter, the outskirts of our universe might be projecting us. And according to the mathematics, they say that it's true, according to the math, And so anyway, so what I'm coming to the point is that just because we don't see things and we live through life like this, there's so many strange things in this reality that why would it be strange that our consciousness moves on? There's another professor, I think from Arizona, and he's teamed up, he's a neurologist, and he teamed up with a theoretical physicist, and he was talking about how microtubulars in your brain, and your basic structures of your neuron cells, how they show quantum processes, basically. So they're saying that your consciousness could, just like quantum mechanics, it could be at 2 places at once. So why is it weird to think that our consciousness, might not be completely in our head? It could be like in the cloud, something like that. But so why would the spirit world be anything different? So I'm science is bringing me closer to Nicholas, and it's also bringing me closer to Swedenborg, and spirituality's bringing Paola closer to Nicholas and also closer to Swedenborg. So we're both kind of getting in together like that.
I really love the idea of this quantum entanglement, which is something that's been studied, it's documented and so on, and thinking of that as applying to the spiritual world. There's just a lot of cool stuff in what he said about how do you know that there isn't another realm. Even this world is doing these strange things like this,
right?
That are bringing things together that are far apart, faster than the speed of light. It's instantaneous.
Why wouldn't there be similar, tangible, observable principles at work across this?
Right.
So that was Conrad's journey, and now we want to hear a little bit about Paola and how she came to be working through the grief and the tragedy that they were dealing with, and to find some comfort in Swedenborg's material and other spiritual teachings and groups and environments.
Angels, a earth angel, they helped me, like things like they were coming on my path and I was falling. And I remember that your mom, she was one of them, because she sent me like a nice book, like this one, Nobody Dies. And she sent me this book, and then this meant so much to me. I read it, and then, and that's what I needed at that time when I received it. It's almost like I was receiving gift, and things that were shown on my path. And then one of these things was that I found this group which I'm part of. The name is Helping Parents Heal. And that was also, I found this group because of a synchronicity of event. And it just came to me, this group. And it's an incredible group of parents that lost their children. They have the children on their other side. And it was founded from 2 parents that they lost their children. And it's just like it's a different group compared, all the other I cannot even say the word, Bremen group of, we have group of parents that lost their children, because we focus on we try to study actually and we discuss about the evidence of an afterlife, and in a non-dogmatic way. So any people can be part of this group, but it doesn't matter their beliefs, the religion that they believe, and it's a group that gives you hope. That there is an afterlife, and then we discuss about the sign that our children gives to us. That they're still in our life. They are not here in the physical, but they are very much present. With the energy they give us like signs, and they help us through this very difficult journey. And so if there is any parents out that is listening to this interview and and lost, a child. And I really, advise them to look into this group. And I can give the website helpingparentsheal.org. And it's an amazing group, like I said, and it's helping me so much. They're like incredible, parents, the help and speakers. We have like a little speaker Zoom meeting, and so it's really a good help and gives you hope. Like I said, losing a child is one of the toughest things that can happen to a parent, because it's just like you don't you do this something terrible, but so it's like you need you need to have I just want to tell to people, if there's somebody out there that lost their child, they are not alone, and and there is a support group that is focused on hope and like it is the only way to be able, in my opinion, to you will never heal of this, you will never, you will always you will always miss your child, but it gives you like a hope, like of keep going to live this life. This is a very hard journey. This life, that's what I learned, is the hurt physical life is very hard. And I learned everything I learned. I believe it now. I believe that we are a soul in the spiritual body, that we are doing an experience of this physical hurt. And then, and sometimes, the experiences are very hard. There's so much suffering out in the world. There's so much suffering. And then sometimes from suffering is where it comes growing.
So the group that she was describing is Helping Parents Heal, helpingparentsheal.org. I actually had the privilege of getting to talk with them just last night, and it's an awesome mission that they're on, and an awesome group of people. So she Paola also talked a little bit more about how she thinks Swedenborg's concepts can be helpful to people of all kinds who are dealing with some sort of loss.
I think in Swedenborg, it really helped me so much on. It was just really because maybe that's what I didn't say on the show, that being like Swedenborg, like being so like a pioneer. He was a pioneer of all these out-of-body experience. There was not the internet back then. People didn't know about near-death experience, about a lot of things. Now there is a lot of studying, a lot of talking. And so it's like, it made me think wow, it was really, this guy was really ahead of his time. It's like everything made sense. And then I started to study everything. And so everything was getting back to Swedenborg. It was really into something, and it makes really, the way they describe, this, everything makes sense. So I think there would be a lot of help, for all the mom and the parents to see, to introduce this Swedenborg philosophy.
It's so powerful to me. I mean, could Swedenborg have imagined living at his time that he would be helping people hundreds of years in the future with some of the most tragic things they ever go through? And I like the way she described him as a pioneer there. And so that's when push comes to shove, is when you go through something that painful, and something, in some ways they were saying, you can never even heal from that totally or something, but you can find a way to live with it and take a positive view of it and everything. So to have Swedenborg's works help with a thing like that is just really moving to me.
Yeah, totally. And the softening of the explaining of the human experience, the giving the why to the things we go through, the letting us understand, exactly just how much separation there is and when that will be over. I mean, all that's I think the kind of clarity we want to try to bring. I mean, that's why people pursue spiritual knowledge in the first place.
And even though you're not having that sensory experience of your son anymore, you realize through these principles that love and that thought is bringing you together on another level.
And who knows, us knowing that there is that actual, real, spiritual, literal connection there. Maybe that opens us up to feeling it more tangibly. Maybe it strengthens it. If thought can bring presence spiritually, what does knowledge do? I mean, does it open up things? Does it make it possible? So on that note, hope that you all can get something out of this that you can connect with, and that's the end of our show. If you didn't want to like and subscribe before, but maybe you do now, please feel free to do that. And if you want to make this kind of programming possible, consider joining us on Patreon. We are a nonprofit, so it's through donations that this kind of programming can be made. And if you go join us on Patreon, and pledge a little donation per month, we give you extra behind-the-scenes footage and things as a thank you. This week we've got more from Conrad and Paula. They've got some stories about these signs that they felt like they were getting from their son, Nick. So hopefully you'll join us there. Check it out. Dr. Jonathan Rose, thanks so much.
I just have a closing question.
Nope, we're out of time.
Is Matt, is he still
I
down?
hadn't heard him for a while. He must have found his way out of the building. Somehow he'll be
That's so,
fine. He's
so weird.
He's a
But anyway.
resourceful young man. Everybody, congrats to all of you for making it through the show. It's going to be an awesome week next week, because here we were talking about that love and connection. And next week, our show is about reunions in the afterlife.
Yeah, where you really see this playing out in 3D.
Yeah, which is, I don't even think we planned it this way, but it's an awesome companion piece here. This is what it's like when you observe, this separation become separation no more. So hopefully we'll join you for that. And in the meantime, hope you have a great week.
Swedenborg and Life Live is Curtis Childs, host and showrunner, with co-host Jonathan Rose. Live stream tech and graphics by Stuart Farmer and Matthew Childs. Show writing and chat moderation by Karin Childs and Chelsea Odner.